The Single Tracks podcast is brought to you by TPC, the Pros Closet. Now is the perfect time to upgrade, and TPC has an industry-leading selection of new and certified pre-owned bikes, plus frames, wheels, and accessories. Each certified pre-owned bike is inspected, tested, and serviced, and every bike includes 30-day returns. Visit tpc.bike/singletracks and enter code SingleTracks40 to save $40 on every order over $200. That's the Pros Closet at tpc.bike/singletracks. And look for the link and coupon code in the show notes. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guest is Lachlan Morton. Lachlan is a professional cyclist and mountain biker from Australia, currently riding for UCI WorldTeam EF Education EasyPost. He's notched podium finishes at the Leadville 100, rode the fastest known time for Kokopelli's trail in 2020, and set the Everesting cycling world record also in 2020. He's competed in the Alt Tour in 2021, cycling the entire Tour de France route unsupported, beating the peloton by 5 days. Thanks for joining me, Lachlan.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, first off, congrats on taking third at Unbound.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. Nice to have a little race up the front there.
Yeah. Well, so you finished the 200-mile race in just over 10 hours, which is obviously a long time on the bike. Were you thinking there might be such a close finish from the beginning of the race?
Yeah. Like that race now, it's always got a pretty strong start field.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of riders who can really compete at the front.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing, I mean, it's long and it's pretty rough roads and that kind of thing. It's definitely a challenging race, but there's nothing super obvious to split it up in the last sort of 50K, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And generally, if you've made that group, you're going to be, in decent shape. And everyone's at a pretty similar level. So I tried my best to sort of split things up because I'm not the fastest in the finish. But yeah, it came down to a group of us.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I mean, I have much more of a mountain bike background, and you're not used to seeing those close finishes. I mean, you are in road racing, obviously. So is gravel, in that way, is it more like road racing, or is there kind of that mountain bike element that can also kind of split the field up?
It's definitely in between, I think. The fact that like the race split down to, I think we were just 12 riders after probably 20 miles.
Mm-hmm.
That would very, very rarely happen in a road race unless there was like a big climb or something. And that kind of came down to some mud sections, some rough gravel sections, and then obviously like legs. So
yeah,
I mean, that's the fun challenge of gravel racing. I think it kind of falls. I think the best gravel courses fall like right between mountain biking and road racing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you get like a big spread of courses, the same way you do in mountain biking, But yeah, for me, the races I enjoy the most are the ones that kind of fall right in the middle, where there's still a tactical element, and if you're able to ride the technical sections, efficient and smooth, there's something to be gained there. But then you also still just need like raw horsepower. So it's a fun format of racing.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I think I enjoy like racing gravel more than I do riding gravel, Like I don't like wake up in the morning. If it like, I generally have two bikes with me, and it's always pretty hard to choose a gravel bike over a mountain bike unless you're in a certain place where you don't have access to trails or that. But I think like gravel racing is really fun because the speed is really high. It's a lot about like controlling traction, still positioning, reading the roads, that kind of thing. So it's definitely like, you race something like Unbound, it's 10 hours long.
Yeah.
But it goes really, really quickly because you're constantly, focused on what you're doing.
Right.
Trying to keep the air in the tires and put out your best best result possible. So yeah, it's good fun, you know. If I'm honest, I think like gravel racing's actually grown on me.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that too about, choosing between the mountain bike and the gravel bike. I mean, looking at your Instagram, you ride your gravel bike like a mountain bike. I mean, you're always, it looks like hitting single track when you can and just trying to have as much fun as possible with the gravel bike. I mean, do you think the gravel bike is kind of the perfect mix of the two where you can do both? You can go on a long ride, but you can also maybe ride some more fun stuff like single track?
Like if I end up on single track on my gravel bike, I would almost always prefer to be on my mountain bike. It's usually just because I've either found something or I've gotten bored with what I was doing. And I mean, that being said, if you have like a very specific type of single track where it's really smooth and just like fast flowing, like you get with like the single track that like cows make or something.
Yeah.
Like that's really fun on a gravel bike and, a fun challenge, and you can go quite fast on it. But for me, like the ultimate bike is like a cross-country mountain bike for what I do. Like they're very capable now. So you can ride most of the stuff that I want to ride, and they're so efficient that you can really do big loops on them and still cover quite a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I think like,
yep.
Yeah, like the best kind of use case for me is like for a gravel bike is like if you're doing like a mixed terrain ride where you will end up, maybe on the road for more than 40% of your ride, then the gravel bike's nice, right? Because you can still be quite efficient and fast. Or, here sometimes I'll do a ride and then meet up with a group or something who are on road bikes, so then it's nice to be on. I used to have this like idea when I first started riding off road, because I just like simplicity. I was like, there's got to be just like a bike that I can have, and I messed around with like
a quiver killer.
And I messed around with the smaller wheels, like 650 wheels, mountain bike tires, and then there's always a compromise, with any bike. So now I just realized that I just need more bikes. Unfortunately.
But it sounds like you're getting it done with just 2 bikes for the most part. I mean, for a lot of people, it's like that's not a lot of bikes.
Yeah, and I mean, I have more bikes, but generally I basically don't ride my road bike ever anymore.
Yeah,
and I just have 2 sets of wheels for my gravel bike. And it's basically the 2 extremes. I just have like a set of road tires that I think I've used like twice this year. And then I have like the biggest possible tires I can fit in it. So like a 2.1 on the front and then like a 47 or something in the back. And then I just have a scalpel that I ride all the time. I have been messing around a little bit with the hardtail. Just with like, the Lifetime series that I'm racing, the mountain bike races are all pretty fast and smooth sort of trails. So there is an advantage to riding a hardtail, and it's a fun like new skill to learn. I think it's like it's a good thing to learn technique on a hardtail, because you definitely have to work a little more to find speed.
Right.
So I have been riding that a little bit, but generally I would say 90% of the time it's just 2 bikes, and I would be happy with that. Yeah,
nice. Well, so you're known for taking an unconventional approach to bike racing. How did you first get into cycling competition?
There was like a local club where I grew up in Port Macquarie, like a road cycling club. It's not like a big town, and for a smaller town in Australia, it was like a unproportionately big cycling club. Because it was run by an Olympian, Graham Sears, who became my first coach. Anyway, he just did a really good job of pulling his club together. And my dad was pretty big into motor racing, so we were going to race go-karts. But we had like family friends lived us down the road, kids the same age, and their dad was also really into motor racing. And they wanted to split us up because like we were pretty competitive kids. And so we'd had like little Kiwi 50s and motorbikes that we'd almost killed each other on. So they didn't want us to be in the same category. Anyway, they started go-kart racing and we wanted to do something different. So part of the deal was we could get bikes. And then once we got bikes, we were like, I want to race. So we went down to the local club.
Huh.
And this was pretty much all my older brother, like, pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just copying him because he was, 2 years older than me and coolest person in the world to me at that time. So I just basically went down the local club, and then we started racing. On Saturdays, they would have a handicap, and on Tuesdays, they would do like a criterium.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of grew out of that. I didn't train at all at that point. I was pretty young. I was probably 8 or 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And then when I was, I think, 11 or 12, we went on like a big family holiday to Europe. And on that holiday, we saw like a stage of the Tour de France.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, for me, it just like clicked. I was like, that's what I want to do. This is like a real sport. This is cool. And then that's when I just started training like a maniac. And that was like the sole goal, the only plan,
Yeah. That's, I mean, as an 8 or 9 year old kid, I don't know. I would be bummed that like I don't get to do the go-kart racing. That seems like it would be way more fun than riding bikes. But it sounds like you're such a competitive person. No matter what the activity was, you were going to go all in. I mean, was that kind of your motivation? Just competition?
Yeah, initially for sure. And I think when you're a kid who's young, you just you gravitate towards things that you were good at.
Mm-hmm.
And like cycling, it was pretty low hanging fruit, really. There weren't many bike riders, my age when I grew up.
Yeah.
So like you're like, oh, I'm good at this. I can do well at this, and you get that gratification from going to a race once a week and doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think what I really liked, I'm like I'm pretty, not a loner, but like I don't mind spending time alone. And so once the training element kicked in, that's when I really kind of fell in love with it, because I could, get up at 5 a.m. and like put lights on my bike and go training and have this freedom.
Yeah.
And, I would spend like 3 hours a day before school on my bike. And
wow.
I always just remember having this feeling of like I'd already kind of had a day, before the day started. And, I could have ownership of that.
Mm.
And so that's what really like pulled me in, like that and trying to win races.
Right.
But like I'm only competitive in a like race scenario, I'm not like one of those people who needs to be winning all the time.
You can turn it on and off. Like, are you competitive if you're playing cards or board games or other stuff like that, or it's just biking?
Absolutely not. Just riding. Like even, I mean, I used to be even competitive in training, but now it's purely if I've got a number on now, but yeah, I'm not like a hectic athlete, who needs to be first everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it seems like in 2014, you did the documentary film with your brother Angus, Thereabouts. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seemed like that was kind of a turning point for you too. Like, did you start to look at competition differently after that? Or was that not a change? It was just like I know what I want to do now more.
No, that's a definite shift. I mean, like anyone who's 20 years old, you're still trying to work out your whole direction in life. And for me, there was like a big turning point because I'd essentially like achieved what I wanted, which was to make like the elite level of the sport, and I was only like 20 years old and I had like a good season, won some races, but was just like still unhappy. And when I say still unhappy, I like became unhappy, I think, once I got to that point.
Yeah.
For a number of different reasons, but like I'd kind of isolated myself and was so far down the rabbit hole trying to win races that it had just like eroded everything away.
Yeah.
Everything else away. And yeah, it was like, on that ride, it was kind of taking stock a little bit and working out like what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that was probably the first bike ride I'd done, or not the first, but first big bike ride I'd done that didn't have like a purpose to it. You know, like I wasn't training. It wasn't a training camp. I wasn't racing. It was just like, let's just go and ride bikes. And yeah, it was just like a big shift in mindset for me. I was like, oh wow, I can have like these kind of experiences through riding.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a departure from everything I'd done on a bike before that.
Mm.
And yeah, that was like, I want to do more of this. So that kind of like led the transition out of like world tour racing for a while, because I knew I just needed that time out for myself. And then we started to do a few more trips.
Right.
And I came to the US to race in like a bit less intense environment and joined a smaller team. And yeah, that was kind of like the beginning, I guess, of like I mean, eventually I did go back and race in the world tour for a number of years. And I think another 5 years or something. But it was definitely more on my own terms with like a conscious decision to do it. And definitely like seeking to find much more of a balance in my riding and in life in general. But I mean, riding is my life, so same thing.
Yeah. Well, so we've heard that you're hoping to make a run at the record for circumnavigating the world by bike. So is an attempt still on your radar for that?
Yeah, it's a possibility. There's obviously like the conflict with Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
That definitely complicates that. But I mean, you know.
Is that, so do you have like a route in mind? And I mean, Russia is huge. So I imagine pretty much any route's going to have to go through there.
Yeah, it's kind of like you really do need to go through there if you're trying to go fast. So yeah, and I mean, it's actually been good because like we sort of had this idea, and it's always a temptation to just like, oh, what's the next biggest thing? What's the next biggest thing? And then, you know,
that's the world. There's nothing bigger.
So yeah, it's definitely something I still want to do. I think I would like to play with the format a bit because I mean, currently you do it supported. And you just have to, I think the rules are, it's like the circumference of the Earth. That's the distance you have to cover, which is like more or less 30,000 K. And then you have to hit 2 points of polarity, basically the opposite sides of the Earth.
Yeah, antipodal points. I had to look that up.
Antipodal points. Yeah, that's the most confusing bit about the whole thing. And yeah, I think like the reality of it's a lot of logistics.
For sure.
It's wildly expensive. And it's like, I mean, you don't even have to hit every continent. I mean, of course, you're not going to go right in like Antarctica or that, but like the route, it's like you could skip like Africa. And you're like, okay, so like, you know, I think it would still be a cool experience, but it would be like a lot of highways.
Right.
A lot of just like in the aero bars cranking along, which, I don't know. I'm like, it's one of those records that you're like, am I just trying to like have the record? You know? And if that's the
goal, have an
then,
experience,
like,
right? I mean, there's so much that you would potentially see and yeah.
Yeah, it would be a shame to like miss all this nice riding because you're like, trying to go on the hot route and cover the most Ks.
Yeah.
So it's been good because I can like have a bit more time to think about how I would want to do it.
Yeah.
And what would make for the best experience as well as like the biggest challenge, you know?
Yeah.
So it's definitely something I still really want to do. I just don't know if I'll do it in that initial format that we thought. I mean, maybe I will and I'll come around to that idea, but yeah, it's on the back burner for now, but definitely on the list of things I want to do.
Yeah.
You know, in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Well, so Mark Beaumont, I believe, is the one who still has the record. And he wrote a book about it, The Man Who Cycled the World, which an awesome book, super fascinating. Have you spoken with Mark or have you read his book? Like, did that kind of inspire you, or is this like again, one of these you doing your own thing?
No, I haven't read the book, and I haven't met him. He's obviously an incredible athlete. That's like a very stout record It's a lot of kilometers every day.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of mental and physical ability to do that. So I have a lot of respect for that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I haven't read the book, or I mean, I like to go into things a little bit not naive to it, but just like maybe slightly underprepared. So I know like there's still an element of like I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hell of a record for sure.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is, it must be a lot about like getting in and out of airports quickly and like.
That's right. Yeah, it's almost like a triathlon. Yeah.
Yeah, and you need like a group of people who are helping you to do that. So I think maybe one of the things or the biggest thing that has me second guessing the record is it's so inaccessible. You know, like unless you have a lot of funding,
right? It's not like there are a lot of attempts on it.
No, because I think it's such a big undertaking. I like the idea of like an established route that is safe, but also interesting, a big challenge.
Yeah,
that anyone can throw some bags on their bike and have a crack at. I think that's a cool idea. But again, a huge project, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, is it risky to sort of publicize your FKT attempts ahead of time? Like, do you normally do that? Like, if you're going to do an FKT, are you letting people know that you're doing it, or would you rather just kind of like do it as a sneak attack?
I don't really mind. I don't think the plan with the around the world one, there wasn't. We'd literally just start speaking about it, and then I don't know. Then I saw it on the internet somewhere. So yeah, it wasn't like a big plan to go and announce it. Like, I'm going to go do this.
Yeah. But like your Kokopelli's FKT, like, do you worry if you say, hey, I'm going to go for the FKT and then say you don't do it, like you fail and you don't set a new record time? Like, are you worried about that at all? Or does that help motivate you to kind of put it out there?
I don't know. And I think if you're purely in it for the record, then like, you know, you're going to have a shitty time anyway. So like, I try and make it like, yeah, of course you're trying to go as fast as you can, but if you're only going to get the record out of it, then like it's a bad motivation. But like I rode Kokopelli 2 or 3 weeks ago and didn't tell anyone, you know, and I had like an hour and a half to do the last 15K and then sliced a sidewall.
Oh man.
And just had to hike out. But like, I just wanted to go do that because I was like in the area, and I was like, it'd be sweet to go out there and have another day on the trail. It's like it wasn't a big announcement, even though I was going significantly faster than the last time I rode it. So I guess like, yeah, I think like ideally no one knows, right? Because then it's easier to create your own mental environment. But I think like I've just kind of learnt that it's also like part of my job, right? To go and do things that the team can publicize. So I've learnt that like basically you just have to decide on how you're going to do it, the experience you're trying to have, and then go about executing that as opposed to thinking about, you know, the broader appeal of a record or a film or something. I just kind of focus on the writing element.
Yeah. Well, so it seems like a lot of your adventures are tied to like fundraising for various nonprofits. So I'm curious, like, which causes are near and dear to your heart?
That shifts, right? Sometimes you get passionate about different things, but I think generally like anything that allows other people to have experiences on bikes, I think is probably the thing I'm most passionate about. You know, I do genuinely believe that if everyone had access and could ride bikes every day, the world would be a better place, you know, and people would be happier. So I think like, yeah, access to bikes, you know, I think like what World Bicycle Relief does is, you know, they do a very good job at what they do. And that's a cause that I think is, you know, really worth getting behind. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different avenues that you could put your energy into, you know, to like try and help. But I think for me, it makes the most sense to do something that I have like a connection to and like understand a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Well, so it seems like you're definitely someone who's always like trying new things and learning, and obviously like a very experiential learner. So in that way, do you think EF Education, is that like a good sponsorship fit for you? I mean, it seems like that's kind of their mission too, right? So like, do you feel a connection between that? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like all of the most valuable things I've learned have all come through traveling and putting myself in foreign or uncomfortable situations. And their whole program is about taking people and putting them in, different locations for the process of learning. So yeah, it makes total sense. As well as I like the way they value cycling as a sport, and they see value in it, even on a business level. So I think like that's important, because cycling tends to have a pretty high turnover rate of like title sponsors and people who would sort of come into it either because they have a lot of money that they can throw at something and give away, or maybe it's sometimes poorly managed by a team who just they just want a sponsor to put a name on a jersey, and then like that's kind of the end of it. I think EF's good because they're very involved, and like they've just in what I do, they can see the value in that over me going to a road race, for example, because it makes sense, financially for them, if you're honest. So like, yeah, I think it's been a really, really cool partnership.
Yeah. So there's a part in Thereabouts where you mention as a kid riding this Franken bike, a bike that didn't have any brakes. What did that teach you about riding? Did you learn anything about biking from riding without brakes?
Which one? Man, we made so many of those bikes. Yeah, definitely. I think that's why I still feel so much more comfortable like in flat pedals because we used to use the foot to brake. But yeah, we had like a course around the house, and like, to be honest, I think that was like us trying to replicate like motor racing on a bike.
Oh yeah.
Like we would set up these courses and do qualifying and all this kind of stuff. So it was definitely like, I think, a good foundation, and it was like learning like racing and bike skills in a very informal, fun environment, which I think like it's pretty hard you can't really replicate that.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of my most fond cycling memories were like spent, with mates just like racing each other around the house. Probably also the biggest crashes I ever had, for sure. But yeah, and then just like pulling the bikes apart, and we're like, oh, what if we put the big wheel like on the front and then the small wheel on the back, and just like that. Yeah, that it was just a lot of fun, and that was, I guess, my like initial like, and it was still competitive, I guess, but that was like my initial introduction to bike racing.
Yeah. Yeah. And like they say, you learn a lot from crashing, maybe more from some of the riding you do. And it also seems like a good metaphor, right? Like,
and I was a slow learner then.
Yeah. It seems like a good metaphor for life too, though. Like no brakes, like just considering what does that mean, like for life and for racing and career and all of that stuff.
Yeah. It means you go through a lot of pairs of shoes.
Yeah, for sure. So you kind of talked about this, but like, is there a lot of pressure on professional cycling athletes to have this like strong social media presence today? And is that different from kind of when you started racing?
Yeah, I guess. Like I don't have any pressure on it. I guess my social media, well, I only really have Instagram. Well, that's actually all I have, but yeah, I've never had to like push it. I just kind of put things out there that are just what I'm doing, genuine.
Yeah, sponsors aren't saying you got to post something once a week and you got to mention us or.
Nah, I don't do. I mean, there is definitely a lot of that I think that goes on, but I don't. I don't take any of those things on. One, because like is a pain in the ass. Right?
Yeah.
And
You're busy.
2, like, I don't know, people are smart. They know when things are genuine or not, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, I think, like, trying to trick your followers into buying something that, like, you wouldn't, people know straight away. But I think, yeah, like, it's definitely, you can see it in the last few years, like riders obviously having a big push on their social media account because it has value. But yeah, I've never had anything like directly enforced upon me. So I think the second that happened, I would probably do away with it. But no, I mean, I see like there's obviously positive and negatives to it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've met so many great people and had so many great bike rides with people I've met through Instagram. Like basically anywhere I go now, I can like find someone to ride with and they can show me local routes, and or I can just connect with people, you know, who are maybe new on their cycling journey or like have specific questions, and I do my best to like get back to people. I can't get back to everyone, but like that's definitely, I think that those things are good. And sometimes, you know, you'll be like, you know, on a plane for like the second time in a week, going somewhere to do something that you're like, what am I doing? And then you can find, you know, people who like, it gives you motivation too, you know, because people might send you a message to say they've connected with what you're doing, or so there's a lot of positives, you know, and I think it's just about like the way you approach it. You know, if it's a pressure, then, or if you're only like drawing comparisons with people, that's when it becomes like a little bit toxic.
Right.
Or like when it just makes me sad when I see people who like, it's like they're all kitted up and going for the ride just for the video, you know, like, or just to say they're out there. And I'm just like, you're just like dismissing the point a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's great because it's drawn more and more people into cycling, which is, you know, always going to be a positive. But I think like, yeah, the people out there doing it purely for the reaction they're going to get, you know, on social media, ultimately like they're missing out a little bit. But yeah, I'm not like harping on it's definitely a negative thing, because I think there's so many good things that have come out of it, and you do see a lot of connections that are made, you know, through social media that become real world, genuine relationships that I think, you know, that's a positive for sure.
Yeah. Well, thinking more broadly, like, do you think there are things that sponsors and kind of the bike industry can do to support athletes better? I mean, it seems like a big part of it is this, like, you know, brand seeing athletes as like influencers or whatever. Like, is there a better way, you think, that people can support the athletes?
You know, it's really evolving at the moment. You know, it used to be when I started racing, at least it's as it seemed to me, the only way to make a living riding bikes was to win races or do well in races, right?
Right.
That was like a requirement. So that's like a very thin cross-section of the people who ride with bikes, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting now that there are more and more people who are able to carve out a living in cycling, you know, who aren't competitive or are competitive in a very different way. So I think that's cool, and I'm glad to see brands get behind that. And I think the more they get behind that, the nicer the cycling, I mean, the community will grow and it will draw more and more people in, but you're just going to have a much more varied and interesting like cycling landscape, especially amongst, you know, professionals. So
right. I
guess hopefully it's not just like a trend because like, you know, even like as much as my cycling career is based a lot less on results than it used to be, but there is always an element of like, yeah, but you still got to be fast.
Right.
And like, I enjoy racing, so I don't really mind. But I think the more that evolves, the more interesting things you're going to see, out there. And
yeah,
it's like, it's just an evolution that's like taking place that I think ultimately is a positive thing. And the more the bike manufacturers and the industry can get behind it, the better. And just kind of, I guess, being open to different and new ideas, because I think it is just going to, it used to be like, if you think of something like the Unbound XL, right? Even just like 4 years ago, everyone was like, that's crazy. That's just for crazy people. Where now it's just like, there's, a few hundred people on the start line ready to race the whole thing, which I think is exciting. But, as even those spaces become more competitive, it's going to draw people into even further out and more interesting places. So, I guess I'm excited to see where it goes. And I think there's probably never been a better time to be a professional athlete, really. Like, even though it's potentially more complicated, I think that it's more now what you can make of it, as opposed to having to follow a set path, which I think is a good trend.
Yeah, it's definitely a two-way street, like you said too. Like, the athletes obviously owe something to their sponsors, and so the conventional way is you win races, but as the athlete, I guess it's kind of up to you as well to find different ways to support your sponsors. And so being creative and like doing these different projects has the same result. Maybe it's even better than winning a race. Who knows?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think if your ideas and your execution and your intent is all in line, then you can go and do things outside of racing that can have equally, or if not more of an impact than winning a bike race could. But as you said, like, no one's ever going to pay you to just go ride your bike and no one knows about it. So like, there is always a trade-off, but maybe one day.
Yeah. Well, so in the video of your Kokopelli FKT run from, I guess it was a couple years ago, you look super calm and collected. So was that an accurate reflection of how you were feeling at the time, or are you feeling, what are you feeling during something like that?
I mean, I love those, like the big days by yourself when you're just in control of your effort and what you're doing. Like, for me, that's like, I'm most at home, like, in those situations, And that was something I discovered in like the first like ultra race that I did. I was like, oh wow, this is like, I'm good at this. I feel at home here. And it took me a long time to find that sort of spot in like any competitive sense. But I mean, I've also learned that like, you need to be very calm and try and have a good hold on your emotions doing something like that.
But does that work? You can't just be like, be calm, and then you calm yourself. Like, when you're stressing out, how do you...
It's just through experience of like, I've definitely lost it, my fair share of times. And I've realized that every time you do that, not only does it like, take away from the experience, but it also slows you down generally. So it's just more of having, like, you're always going to have ups and downs, like that just happens, but it's about managing your emotions in a way that you still have control of it and you're still able to sort of execute on what you're doing without getting overly excited or overly down on yourself at any time. And I think also doing something like that where, maybe you're like running it fine on how much water you're carrying, or like those things where it's like, all right, there are consequences if I get this wrong, then you need to be calm, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, you can make rash decisions that have, broader impacts down the trail. So, I'm generally like, very calm with that. Like I said the other day when I was on the trail and sliced my sidewall and then knew immediately, I was like, that's unfixable with what I have here. Well, it was when I would put a tube in it and then I broke my pump, or my pump was broken.
Jeez.
Anyway. But like, then I was just like, all right, calm. I've got phone reception. I'm just going to make a new route to hike out to the I-70 because that's going to be, if I lost it and was upset and trying to continue riding, it would have taken me hours to get out of there because I would have tried to get out down the trail and whatever. Instead, I was like, look, what's happened? You're walking now. Just like get out to a road where you can call someone and try and get picked up. So like that kind of goes back to that, like at the end of the day, I still got to have all the experiences I had up to that point in a way that I really like. So it doesn't detach from that, and it kind of forces you to be like, well, you weren't out here just for a record. So you still had everything that, you still got to do all the riding that you did. So, I think like if you'd seen me on like the first long distance competitive thing I did, I was much less calm.
So this is something you've learned.
Or like the first time I did the Colorado Trail, I was just like a mess, man. Whereas I did it last year and I was so much more collected and calm, and it was such a nice experience, So I would say it just comes through experience.
Yeah. Well, you're calm during the race. What about beforehand? Do you get nervous?
Nah, not really.
Wow.
Like it's always like, you have all the preparing and stuff and getting bikes and food and all that kind of thing sorted, GPX tracks and that. It's almost nice when you can just be like, all right, sweet, everything's ready now. I can just go and do the thing. Yeah. It's not I guess there's probably more nerves before. But the second you start riding, you're like, well, this is what I know, Yeah. Like, this is like, my comfort zone. Yeah.
Is it like a frenzy for you though, preparing? Are you like running around the house like, where's my thing? And I got to have this and I got to have that. Like, are you able to kind of stay calm with that too?
No, I mean, I'm calm with it. I'm never as prepared as I want to be, but I kind of thrive in that chaos of it a little bit. But at least now I know I have all the things that I need. This is just a matter of like locating them and deciding what I'm going to bring. But that's also much easier than it used to be just through experience, right? Like, the things you need and the things you don't need. And now I always bring a little bit more than I probably am going to need, because it just makes you that much more comfortable and calm when you're out there, knowing that you're like prepared. So like I'd say it's still a little chaotic. Normally it's just like a time crunch thing. But not too bad.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so you're at a point where obviously you can pick and choose kind of the races and the adventures that you take on the bike. What do you want your legacy to look like? What is kind of like the end goal? Like, what are you shooting for?
To be honest, I think like the most satisfaction I get out of riding, I mean, on a day-to-day level, like I just like the fact I can go out and decide what I want to do with my day, how I want to go ride my bike. So that's ultimately to just extend that as long as I can into my life. That's my goal. But I think like the goal with racing or taking on challenges and that kind of thing is, one, to just continue to challenge myself, because I think it's important to keep pushing yourself in different ways, because once you stop doing that, it's easy to stagnate, which I don't want to do. But the satisfaction I draw is probably from like now when I go to different events and people have picked up a bike whatever, 3 years ago because they saw a YouTube video and decided that they wanted to do that. And then now they're there on the start line giving it a crack. Like, that's the goal, right? Is to get people involved in the sport and challenging themselves and hopefully bettering their own lives on the way. That's what I would like to, leave the sport having drawn a number of people into cycling that otherwise would never have interacted with the sport. That's what I would like to do. But to be honest, like, it's genuinely everything I do is drawn out of like a genuine interest and motivation to do it. And I want to keep that intact, because going back, it's easy to get drawn into things, and there's so many opportunities to race and do things now that it's easy to get drawn into things for the wrong reasons, in terms of like, maybe you're trying to get more views on a video, or maybe you're trying to race something because you just want to add it to like a list of races you've won or something. And I think if you're doing it for those reasons, you'll ultimately, lose passion for what you're doing, or you just won't have a good time in whatever said event or that is. And like, that's probably my biggest priority, or a kind of rule, I guess, is only taking on things because I'm genuinely excited about going to do them,
Yeah. Well, clearly it shows in your videos and all the projects you do and your racing. Inspiration is definitely the word that comes to mind. So thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to follow along with you on your next adventures.
Awesome, mate. No, thanks for having me.
Well, you can keep up with Lachlan at Lachlan Morton on Instagram, and be sure to keep following Single Tracks, where we'll continue to update you on his accomplishments. Thanks for joining us. That's all I've got this week. Talk to you again next week.